Dr. Andrew Childs is a professor of music and public speaking. He is also the college dean at St. Mary's College at St. Mary's, Kansas. Dr. Childs has taught at previous institutions, including Yale, and is a gifted tenor and professional performer who has performed with symphonies, orchestras, chamber, and new music ensembles throughout the country. His talk today, it's a workshop talk, will be on cultivating a love for music. Please welcome Dr. Childs.
Thank you, Kevin, for stealing my thunder and destroying my talk. And giving me 45 minutes is very generous of you, really, really. I can't remember the last time I spoke for as little as 45 minutes, but I'm going to try to do that tonight because it's been a really long day, and I congratulate you for your attention. Before I forget about it, in your folders, you might have seen two documents that I left for you, which will make more sense after this talk. And one of them is called the List, and that is it's a project I did about 25 years ago now. And it's a top 100 list, basically, with a little bit of commentary. So what I tell students all the time is if we create a void in your life because we've taken away bad music, it's kind of our responsibility to fill that void with something good. And here's some suggestions. Nature abhors a vacuum, as you know. The next thing that I left you is answers on frequently asked questions about music. And this relates to a thing that I call the chart, which we're going to talk about. And so that is, well, what about this? I've stopped listening to this. So there are questions that I found that I was answering a lot, so I figured they might have a general use. So I've drawn that up. All right, I'm going to start with a prayer of my own. And you won't need a sign of the cross here. You're just going to need to listen. Father mentioned the Ave Maria Stella this morning, and let's just contemplate that title as we listen to this piece. So here's the thing about God's love for you. It is of such depth and of such delicacy that he knew from all eternity that your intersection with that beautiful piece of music was going to happen, and that it was going to affect you in a certain way. And that's pretty remarkable. The other wonderful thing about this piece, and it's by a composer named Philip Stopford, who's probably asleep right now somewhere in England, is the fact that God will not leave us orphans. And if we think that things are so bad that nothing good is coming out of this age, we're quite wrong. Beautiful things are happening, and not only is it important to note the fact that contemporary art exists of the highest quality, it's also important to note that these are composers who are speaking in our own accent. They've read the same newspapers or whatever it is that people read today. And that's a very comforting thing indeed. That's a beautiful piece. This is a workshop, though, so we've got to keep moving. And I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to a few reminders of what music is, how it kind of affects you. We also want to talk about what this business of cultivation and love is about when it comes to music. And I want to take you through a piece, not this one. This was sort of spontaneous. Father inspired this. I'm glad you did, because I've got all of it on there. If anyone, just call out requests. I'll play them for you. I'm sure it's on here somewhere, the magic box. And we're going to take a guided listening through a beautiful piece, which is more about love than just about any piece I know. I remember 15. I was not remotely Catholic when I was 15. I was not remotely Catholic when I was 25. I was entirely Catholic when I was 27. And that's a long time not to be Catholic. And I liked very much hearing the beautiful story about a beautiful little lamb. And I'm not that. In fact, I was very much a wolf. And it's a great irony that God has made it my job as an old wolf to take care of little lambs. And I'll tell you something. That's a job I take very seriously. Because no one knows a young wolf like an old wolf. So, irony of ironies. All right, there you are. We are creatures of intellect, of emotion, of passion, of appetite, right? This is a fairly well-ordered individual. That's also, by the way, the extent of my drawing capacity. I draw that student for my students, and they giggle, as they well should. But it's actually a perfect representation of, well, me physically, but us as individuals. We want to have these components because we can't not have these components. You understand that? You have a heart, you have a head, you have appetites. It is a mistake, and we'll hear this, it's a mistake to try not to have a heart. In other words, to be so intellectual that you transcend your sort of emotional being, you become a superhuman. Surely a man without a heart would be an angel, right? No. A man without a heart is a monster. You have to have a heart. It's very important, actually. It's a sort of balancing, tempering element between your lower appetites and your potentially angelic intellect, right? It's a balancing thing. You need all of these things. And God understands this. Now, music reflects this relationship in a very interesting way. Intellect should be at the top. A harmony, right, which corresponds to emotion, is a supportive element. Intellect, melody, emotion, harmony, rhythm, passion, right? And if they're in the right order, everything's good. This is a balanced individual. If we turn ourselves upside down, this is a problem. Now, this is a man who's driven by his passions, by his appetites. The heart's still in there, but it's a little bit confused, and the intellect's very, very small, as you can see. Now, if you have this is a disordered man, he's inverted. You could have disordered music, and it would reflect this sort of inversion, wouldn't it? Imagine a music which has very, very little melody, some harmony, but a lot of rhythm. We all hear that, don't we? It's inverted. It's inverted. It's not music yet, but it's so. Here we want to be, right? That's ordered. And again, why is this so important? why does God care about the fact that you need to sort of balance this business of intellect and emotion and passion? Well, you have an intellect and a heart. And that's almost unique. There's one other person who has that combination. And if we had a crucifix to look at, you would see that person. So God himself is the only other person who has that combination. That's important for you to recognize, because if you don't think God gets it, you're wrong. He absolutely does. The human condition is about managing this affair of the heart. You might say the human condition is an affair of the heart. And the heart's a remarkable thing. It's made to break. God himself shows us that. It's also made to heal. So we'll talk about the nature of love a little bit further down. But it's important that we get this relationship right. Now, how does this relate to music? Well, here's a little thing I like to call a chart. And I like to put music in one of 4 quadrants. There's an upper left, an upper right, a lower left. And we have 2 lines, 2 axes. One goes vertically from low to high, and one goes horizontally from bad to good. And so in the lower left-hand corner, where that little guy is music that is low and bad. Now, we know we should avoid that. The problem with stuff in that quadrant is when we try to, because of affinity or taste or exposure, get as close to that line as possible without crossing it, coming from the good side, or knowing that it's bad, staying as close to the line in the middle as you possibly can. That's a wrong way of looking at things. And students will often say with great sadness, well, I love this, it's my music, and it's true. You do love it. And I would be a fool to tell people that you're going to outgrow your taste for things that are not good for you. I wish that were true. I wish when I drove past Wendy's, it would mean nothing to me. And I would drive past. But that's absolutely not true. Every time I drive past Wendy's, I want all of it with an inordered passion. All the burgers, do they make a quadruple? Do they make a quintuple burger with all the bacon and the cheese, just sort of in a little bowl of mayonnaise? That's kind of where that part of me wants to be, and I say no to that. I say no to that. Why? Because it's not good for me, and it's beneath me. It's about putting away the things of the child. It's also about understanding that you need better companions than that. Even if it's sort of close to that line, you see country and rock. Country is mostly, it's straddling a little bit. Rock is almost entirely on the not-so-good side. But be very careful. Students, children, friends love to paint you into corners. And they want you to make an absolute statement about something which is not absolute. It's all wrong, it's all evil, it's all bad. Oh yeah, what about this one? And they find you the one that costs you your credibility. Not worth it. Occasionally you got to say it depends. But here's the thing that I'll say, and maybe it's a particular song. I like whatever the flavor of the month is, or whatever they grew up on, or sometimes it's their parents' music. It's interesting. And I'll say, okay, we'll do a little experiment. We know what the music is. It's 4 chords, which are good chords. They work well together. It's a driving rhythm, frequently syncopated. That's okay. Nothing wrong with syncopation. Mozart uses it, Beethoven uses it, Palestrina uses it. But let's print out the words. And here's my deal to them. Just print out the words of this song that is dear to you. And I will call your mother, and I will recite this text to her as poetry. And that should be okay, yes? It should be okay. And if they get a little bit squirmy, then we have the conversation that, this is beneath you. It's appealing. We don't deny the appeal. That creates real disorientation. But we give it up as a thing of the child. Because it really is childish stuff. Anyway, so you're not supposed to be down there. The stuff on the right, this is folk music. This is inarguably good. You need this in your life. You should be able to sing it. You should be able to play it. It's a foundation of any reasonable educational system in music. It is important for you to know folk music, but it's not enough. That's the only problem with folk music. It's not enough. If you were to draw a literary analogy, and if someone read at that level, you would not be proud of him. You'd be embarrassed for him, right? Frog and Toad, off the charts good. Who doesn't love Winnie the Pooh? You're a fool not to love Winnie the Pooh. You got to read Winnie the Pooh. Who hasn't read? Everybody here has read a story to a 5-year-old. Please tell me that's true. If you haven't, go find one and read a story. It's the best. Now, it's a little creepy if you don't know the 5-year-old, but stories that are appropriate for that child, though, are not appropriate for somebody who's everybody's age in here. I'm still allowed to like them. Yes, sure, absolutely. But now they're useful for someone else. They're useful for someone beneath you because you're trying to draw them up. Isn't that great? So God is trying to use good music to draw you up. The emotions are a huge part of this, as you just felt when you listened to that piece. I hope you felt something when you listened to that Stopford. It's a beautiful piece, especially when you can connect the sentiments of the text to the music. So it's using your intellect to draw your lower nature through the emotions up towards him. The devil wants just the opposite, doesn't he? Right? So your emotions are used to sort of cloud your intellect as your passions drive you down. Not good. All right. I don't know how many folks here have their playlists that they're still addicted to. It's okay. You just know that you have to give it up. Matthew 7. What man among you, if his son shall ask him bread, will give him a stone? This is a dictionary definition of rock and roll. Now, I like the dictionary a lot. We're going to talk about definitions a lot tomorrow. It gives you an air of, I don't know, objectivity. Hard to argue with a dictionary definition. This one doesn't exist, by the way. Stay close to your old dictionaries because the definitions of certain things change. And I like this one. This dictionary definition, this definition of rock and roll no longer exists in the dictionary. This is 1990. A style of popular music of Afro-American origin characterized by an insistent, heavily accented, syncopated rhythm and an obsessive repetition of short musical phrases tending to build up tension in an audience and induce a state of group frenzy when played very loud. You're not objective at all. Dictionary definition. Remarkable candor. Remarkable. I love definitions. Anyway, let's get real. Obscure roots. There's a lot of African tribal drumming here. This is not good stuff. There is a supernatural element to some of the foundational moving parts of rock and roll that are incompatible with Christian nobility, for sure. We could talk at another conference about the history of the ascendancy of popular forms, but we don't have time. Just understand that the guys who were supposed to be doing responsible things, the guys up there on the high side of things, drifted over that line into bad. And you think, well, that's kind of curious. How can something be high and bad? Well, the devil's pretty high, and he's pretty bad. It's all about intellectual pride, as it turns out. So you would think that high music would be very beautiful. What's the sound of intellectual pride when it comes to music? I'll play it for you. You're going to love it. Said no one ever. GSN. That stands for goatee scratching nonsense. When you listen to this music, you got to scratch your goatee and say, oh, that's deep. That's certainly deep. Anyway, that's what happens when you abandon your post as an artist who's supposed to take care of people. Pride. All right, cultivation. We're talking in this workshop about cultivating a love for music. We're going to start with a quote. This is a quote from a wonderful author named John Senior. I don't know if you know John Senior. He writes many things, but he writes a book called The Death of Christian Culture, and he writes another book called The Restoration of Christian Culture. I would recommend both of those very highly, very highly. So this is a quote of his from Death of Christian Culture. That's a forbidding title, but it's actually filled with consolation. Quote, "Culture as an agriculture is the cultivation of the soil from which men grow. To determine proper methods, we must have a clear idea of the crop. What is man?" The Catechism asked, and answers, "A creature made in the image and likeness of God to know, love, and serve him." Culture, therefore, clearly has this simple end, no matter how complex or difficult the means. Our happiness consists in a perfection that is no mere endless hedonistic whoosh through space and time, but the achievement of that definite love and knowledge which is final and complete. All the paraphernalia of our lives, intellectual, moral, social, psychological, and physical, has this end. Christian culture is the cultivation of saints. Close quote. That's a beautiful line, the cultivation of saints. That's our job. That's what culture should do, but we are the farmers, and we're also the plants. And we plant seeds, and we make other plants. So it's not just you, it's those who come after you, either of your own generation, which means that you make them, or those under your charge, those whom you influence. You can be a positive influence in their cultivating the soil of themselves to be more fruitful. We all know the parable of the sower of the seed, Matthew 13. There's a seed that falls by the wayside, the birds gobble it up. Right? And these are all us, maybe, we hope not. Right? So this is a troublesome person. Pray for this person. The seed can't even get in. Birds gobble it up. Right? You need to pray for that person, that there's a softening of that soil. The stony, sort of thin soil, it sinks in, it starts to shoot, everything's happy, there's an initial enthusiasm, but the sun comes out, it gets hot, and it withers, dies. Soil needs to be deeper so the roots can go farther. Pray for that person. Is that you? Cultivate yourself. Then we have what? Thorns, oh my word. Here's probably where we most likely are. We're in the world, we have to be. That's the direct order from God, by the way. Be in the world, but not of it. Crucial qualification. But the direct order from God is be in the world. Why? Because if you're not, you can't do any good for the people in the world. Now, you could be a consecrated soul. It's a totally different thing. But most of us are not meant to be cloistered. So, thorns. We're growing amidst the thorns and the weeds, and we can get choked. Right? We somehow need to do a little pruning, do a little weeding. The good ground, obviously, we know that's going to bring forth good fruit 100 times, 60 times, 30 times. Here's the good news. We are not as plots of metaphoric land fixed in our state. We can till, we can work, we can become more fruitful. It's going to take work, though. Right? So it's going to start with better seeds. All right? What are you listening to? What's going in your ears? What's going in the soil of your ears? What's that? What fruit is that going to bear? That's a choice. Choose the better. I'm here to help. All right. We have to talk about love because it's in the title. Kevin was very nice to give me these titles, by the way. I appreciate that. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. To my great surprise, he had told me exactly what I was going to talk about. I'm just glad I checked the website before I came up here. It's kind of beautiful, actually. Love, what does it mean? Love means never having to say you're sorry. That's one of the stupidest things anybody's ever said. That was one of those popular, vapid, moments where somebody really got it wrong. Love should be looking for opportunities to say you're sorry. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This whole business of men and women, we've not exhausted that one yet. Oh, I've got stories. If I had been given more than 13 minutes to give this talk, I could tell you all sorts of great stories. Oh my word. My wife is such a magnificent creature. Goodness sakes. That's my favorite hobby, being madly in love with my wife. It's just the best. But I digress. But you know, since I started with a piece of music that was inspired by Father Rodriguez, that's actually his fault if I go over. So, see how that works? What does it mean? Love is stronger than death. We know that. But it's not a passive thing. Remember, that's not a thing that just sort of happens. True love really does make demands. Okay? In wanting your good, the one who loves you, in a way, first among these people is God, obviously, will not be satisfied until you have made some change for your own good. And that might really put some pretty serious demands on you. But that's the way it should be. St. Thomas Aquinas tells us about movements of charity in the soul. First movement, get over yourself. Get out of yourself. Stop focusing on yourself. That's a big deal, but it's also pretty preliminary. You can't be useful if you're focused entirely on yourself. And all this business of love languages, there's some good in it. You should understand the other, but these are not useful things if it turns out to be, well, here's how I demand that you love me. You should understand me so that you can love me the way I want to be loved. I don't think that's what love should be about. It's different than that. So you get out of yourself. Second movement of charity in the soul, St. Thomas Aquinas, he uses prettier words, but give of yourself. Be generous. Give of yourself. There's got to be something of you to give, right? Nemo dat quod non habet, right? You can't give what you don't have. But you got to give of yourself. That's a movement of charity in the soul. Last movement of charity in the soul, sacrifice. Be willing to sacrifice and be willing to sacrifice everything for love, and especially for the ones whom you love, which is, as far as I can tell, everybody. You love others, some more than others, for sure. But that's universal. That's real love. You must be willing to sacrifice for everybody. Returning back to giving up that stuff that you know you shouldn't listen to. If you're having trouble with that, speaking of love, and we've touched on it, a number of us here today, here's a strategy. Yeah, print out the lyrics. But who's that guy singing about? Singing about your daughter. Personalize it. Singing about your sister. And if you're listening to it, you're letting him. And the pornography thing is even more acutely important to make personal. That's someone's daughter. And if you're a father, what if you knew that person? Can you imagine that? I was a very, very bad boy. But thanks be to God, I was never addicted to pornography. I was addicted to the real thing, but that's a different story. It's somebody's daughter. What if you knew that person? Could you imagine the shock? Like, oh my God, I recognize that person. That would stop things. And what, heaven forbid, if it were your own daughter? We've got to personalize these things sometimes. Otherwise, love is going to get blocked by all of our bad inclinations. All right. We've got a case study here, because it's a workshop. Robert Schumann. Süßer Freund, du blickest mich verwundert an. This is a song about love, and a very particular kind of love. This is, and I'm convinced of this, it's not only the artists, the poet, and the musician take you into the marital chamber. That's a delicate place to be. Now, what makes it art and not pornography is that it's done with beauty and with proportion and with discretion. And remember, this is the most beautiful thing that two human beings can do together. We focused a lot on the worst possible expression of that for money, for display. But we can't forget the fact that this is the most beautiful thing two people can do in being one, blessed by the sacrament of the marriage. Goodness sake. But artists rarely go there. Why? Because that's pretty intimate. This is an amazing piece. And you will hear everything. So, sweet friend, you look at me and wonder. You cannot understand how I can weep. This is another one of those male-female things. So not only are we in that place, I would argue this is their first night. Because we understand in the biblical terms what it means for a couple to know each other. This is an example. You hear it, you see it in the text, and you hear it in the music. This is a couple who are learning each other. It is so delicate. It is so thoughtful. You can hear him, and he's in the left hand of the piano, asking her, is this okay? It's astounding. But she's the one talking, and he doesn't get it. Remember that? Remember that? They are in their marital chamber, and you're going to hear a melody which is no longer in formal wear. It is no longer in work clothes. This is a melody that's in its pajamas. It's amazing. It yawns, it stretches, it caresses. It has no real shape. You never hear melodies like this. You never hear them. Laura just told me I was a perfect 10. Well, Laura, you're very kind. That was funny. David, thank you for laughing. She says I have 10 minutes left, which is different than, never mind. Just cut that part out. Anyway. Let's read it. Sweet friend, you look at me and wonder, you cannot understand how I can weep. She's crying, and he's saying, what's wrong? And she's saying, nothing's wrong. Let the unfamiliar beauty of these moist pearls tremble joyfully bright in my eyes. The German is so gorgeous. Kannst du nicht begreifen, wie ich weinen kann? Lass die feuchten Perlen unbewohnte ziehen. Oh, How anxious my heart is, how full of bliss. If only I knew how to say it in words. Well, guess what? Sometimes words fail in the most beautiful ways. Let them fail. All right, so these first two lines and the second two lines are a repeat of a certain music. We're going to call that music the A section. All right, this is in ternary form structurally. A section, B section, A section. That's the nuts and bolts. But how he makes that work is so beautiful psychologically. The B section is the duet, but we're not quite there. How anxious my heart is, how full of bliss, if only I knew how to say it in words. Come, hide your face here against my breast, for me to whisper you all my joy. What an image. What an image. That is absolute intimacy, that is absolute trust. And what a beautiful image. Right? Trust for a man to sort of be in that position of vulnerability. Trust for a woman to know that she is going to be taken care of. Then this duet. And it starts so delicately. Why I think this is a first night is because initially the piano doesn't really know how it fits with the voice. It's testing, it's asking, it's probing. She gives him permission to sort of join her in the duet proper. And then the words stop. Do you not understand the tears that I can weep? Should you not see them, beloved husband? Stay by my heart. Feel how it beats, that I may press you closer and closer. The music, again, this is absolutely illicit. These are married people. There's no question about what's happening in the music. So tastefully, so beautifully done. Then the music of the A section returns. To what text? Well, here it is. There's some time after this, yeah? Here by my bed, there is room for the cradle. Hier an meinem Bett hat die Wiege Raum. Ui, ui, ui. Silently hiding my blissful dream. The morning shall come when the dream awakes. Und daraus dein Bildnis mir entgegenlacht. And your face laughs up at me. Oh my goodness. What a thing for a wife to say. And it's really true. Not the case, thank goodness, for my children that look like their mother. Have I told you she's a magnificent creature? My word. They're never quite your spouse, but every now and then they look at you and you say, my word. And you realize, we made that. That is us, and we are this one thing. I think that's pretty amazing. And I think you got a couple of artists who do a remarkable job with this. All right, remember all of that, because now we're going to listen to it. Remember, it's going to start, really, it's languid, it's intimate, it's familiar. There's no introduction. It's just sort of this yawning, stretching familiarity in the confines of a very beautiful and private place.
Oh
All of that is in there. It's undeniable. It's intuitively obvious to the most brutish of observers. That's not quite true. It requires a little cultivation. You got to work a little bit, but all of that stuff is in there. And remember, a true cultural friend is not somebody who understands how you feel. A true cultural friend tries to make it better. So your popular friends get how you feel and monetize the fact that they can keep you there. This is somebody who's trying to help you in life. If you old, wonderful married couples out there have forgotten that, there's a reminder. Music does that. It's beautiful. Stunning piece. There's no end to those. There's absolutely no end to those. Again, it takes a little bit of work. I've given you a list, something to think about. If you need help, find me. A little bit of work. All right, last slide. It's hard to break addictions, but you got to do it. If you're addicted to bad music, work now. Fill the void with the good stuff. But yeah, be honest. Start with the words. Personalize it. And really be honest with yourself in terms of complicity. Face it. Fix it. All right. Making addictions to the good. So Chesterton says, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. I kind of like that. It's a Chestertonian way of saying things. But pick up a guitar. Sing some folk music. Make some music. Stumble around on a piano keyboard. Sing poorly. Not in church, but Do this thing, yeah? And understand this is a very hopeful thing. Good habits are hard to break. So if you're in the habit of praying your rosary every day, and there's that one day for whatever reason, you miss it, you fall asleep, it feels weird, doesn't it? It should. But good habits are hard to break. Establish them. There won't be time for the bad. All right, last word. What is the law? This is a conference about love. How do you read? Love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Half of that law is usually easier to keep than the other, isn't it? If I only had to love my neighbor as I love myself, that wouldn't be very hard, would it? Some of us have more trouble loving our neighbor. Isn't that true? Some of us have more trouble loving ourselves. But if you would not treat your neighbor the way you treat yourself, you are not fulfilling the law. That's something to think about. Would you nourish your neighbor the way you nourish yourself? And if you can't say yes to that, you've got to work harder at cultivating a soil in which beautiful and loving things can grow for your sake. Because it's only when you are in that state that you can become most helpful to others. Well, I hope that was something like a workshop. I'm not sure. How many? Do I get negative numbers now, Laura? Oh, over time, please stop. Not only will I stop, but I'm going to go down to the railroad and lay my head upon the tracks. No, I will not. I thank you for your patience.